She didn't cry when she said it. That was the part that stayed with Declan Mercer longer than any word she'd spoken. Avery Calloway sat across from him at the kitchen table they had picked out together, the one with the distressed oak finish she had insisted on at that West Elm in downtown Nashville, and she said it like she was reading from something she had prepared. "You're suffocating me, Declan. I need to live alone for a while." He had heard those words before in movies. He had always assumed the person on the receiving end would argue. He had always assumed they would beg, or at least ask why. Declan Mercer didn't either. He looked at her across that distressed oak table, and he said 4 words so quietly she almost asked him to repeat them. "I just want you to be happy." She blinked. It was the smallest flinch, almost invisible, but Declan saw it. He had spent 2 years learning the language of Avery Calloway's face. He stood up, pushed his chair back without scraping it, and walked to their bedroom. He did not slam the door. He did not make her feel guilty. He began folding shirts. They had moved into the Germantown apartment 18 months earlier. 3rd floor, exposed brick, the kind of place young professionals in Nashville paid too much for because the neighborhood felt like a personality. Avery was a brand consultant for a mid-sized agency on Charlotte Avenue. She had a talent for making things look effortless, products, campaigns, herself. Declan was a project manager at a civil engineering firm, the kind of steady, methodical man who remembered everyone's coffee order and always filed things on time. From the outside, they looked like the kind of couple people pointed to. Inside the apartment, it had been quieter for months. Not hostile, just quiet in the way that means something is missing. Declan had tried. He had tried in the ways he knew how, cooking dinner on weeknights, suggesting weekend trips to Chattanooga, asking about her work with genuine attention. Avery had started describing his attention as pressure, his presence as weight. He had not understood that then. He was beginning to understand it now, folding shirts at 10:15 on a Thursday night. He was out by Saturday afternoon. His friend Marcus Webb had a spare room in his house in East Nashville, a wide craftsman bungalow with a porch that caught the evening light. Marcus didn't ask too many questions. He helped carry the second load from the truck, set a beer on the porch railing, and said only, "You good?" Declan said, "Working on it." Marcus nodded and went inside. That was the right answer, and they both knew it. The apartment lease was in both their names. The monthly rent was $2,040. They had always split it, $1,020 each. Avery's salary covered it easily. Declan's covered it more than easily. He had never made her feel that difference, but it was there in the spreadsheet he kept on his laptop, in the folder labeled simply, shared. He transferred his half of October's rent before he unpacked a single box. He sent it directly to Avery's Venmo with no note. Not because he was performing generosity, because it was still his obligation until the lease was formally renegotiated. That was simply how Declan Mercer thought. The first week was strange in the way that silence is strange after years of sound. He woke up in Marcus's spare room, and for a split second, every morning, his body expected to hear Avery in the kitchen. The sound of her making pour-over coffee with the focused ritual she brought to it. The particular way she hummed when she was reading something on her phone. Then the room would come into focus, different ceiling, different light, and he would lie there for exactly 60 seconds before getting up. He gave himself 60 seconds. That was the rule he made without announcing it to anyone. He went to work. He filed his reports. He ate lunch at his desk. He ran 3 miles after work along the Shelby Bottoms Greenway because the movement helped. He did not text Avery. He did not check her Instagram. He did not ask Marcus what he thought. He was not performing toughness. He was simply trying to respect what she had asked for. Space meant space. He had understood that much. At the end of the first week, Avery texted him once. I hope the move wasn't too hard. He read it 3 times. He typed 4 different responses. He sent, I'm settled and fine. Hope you're well. She did not respond to that. He had not expected her to. The second week passed like the first, organized, forward-moving, quietly interior. He did not feel fine. He felt the specific grief of losing something that hadn't announced itself as ending until it was already over. But grief, Declan had learned a long time ago, doesn't negotiate. You either move through it or you let it move through you. He preferred to keep walking. November 1st was a Tuesday. Rent was due. Declan was in a project review meeting when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Avery. He silenced it and returned his attention to the structural load calculations on the screen. She called again at lunch. He was eating at his desk. He looked at her name on the screen for a moment, then set the phone face down. He had not made a decision not to answer. He simply wasn't ready for that conversation yet. He needed to know what the conversation would be about before he had it. She called a third time at 2:17 in the afternoon, then a fourth time at 2:40, then a text. Declan, can you pick up please? No question mark. That was the way Avery typed when she was anxious, statements where there should be questions. He typed back, in back-to-back meetings until 5. Everything okay? She did not respond for 40 minutes. Then, call me when you're free. He called her at 5:23 from the parking garage. She picked up before the second ring. I need to talk to you about the rent, she said. Her voice had a texture he recognized, controlled on the surface, something pressurized underneath. Okay, he said. What about it? She paused. I didn't realize how much the full amount would be without the split. I know it's technically both our names on the lease, but I thought maybe you could. She stopped. Declan sat in his car in a parking garage and listened to the pause. You want me to keep contributing to the rent, he said. You're not here, but your name is still on it, and I thought. Avery. His voice was even, not cold, just level. I paid my half of October the day I moved out. I have the Venmo record. I did that because it was the right thing to do for the month I had already agreed to. But I'm not living there anymore. Another pause. But the lease. The lease is both our names on it, he said. That means we're both liable. It doesn't mean I pay for your choice to live alone. The sentence landed between them like something solid. He had not said it to punish her. He had said it because it was accurate. And Declan Mercer, for better or worse, spoke in accurate sentences. She called back 20 minutes later. He answered. I think I made a mistake, she said. Those words, 5 of them, carried a weight that all the previous weeks had been quietly building toward. He did not say, I know. He did not say, I told you so. He did not say, come back. He said, what kind of mistake? And here is where this story gets genuinely complicated, because Avery Calloway was not a villain. She was a 29-year-old woman who had convinced herself that what she felt in that apartment was confinement, when what she actually felt was fear. Fear of how much she needed someone. Fear of how visible her need had become. Fear that if she let herself be fully known, she would eventually be left. So she had done what frightened people sometimes do. She had controlled the exit. She had left first before she could be left. And now she was alone in a $2,000 apartment on a Tuesday, the first of the month, with the full rent due, and the specific silence of a space that had once held another person's ordinary sounds. Now, pause for a second here, because Declan is standing at a crossroads that a lot of people have stood at. He could go back. He could agree to keep splitting the rent from a distance, which would be financially generous and emotionally codependent. He could use this moment as leverage, make her ask, make her acknowledge, make her say the things she hadn't said. Or he could simply be honest about where he stood, without drama, without punishment, without performance. What would you do in his position? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how people handle this moment, because the choice here says more about a person than almost anything else. Declan did not go back that night. He went back to Marcus's house, ate leftovers standing at the kitchen counter, and thought for a long time. Not about whether he still loved Avery. He did. That was not the question. The question was whether going back would be returning to something real or returning to something familiar. Those are not the same thing. Most people spend years confusing them. He called her back at 9:30. I think we need to have an actual conversation, he said. Not about the rent. About what happened. She was quiet for a moment. Then, okay. Not on the phone, he said. In person. This week. Okay, she said again. They met on a Thursday evening at a wine bar on 5th Avenue North that they had been to exactly 3 times before, always for something that felt like an occasion. Avery arrived 4 minutes before him. She was sitting at a corner table when he walked in, her hands wrapped around a glass of water, her posture the kind that meant she had been rehearsing. He sat down. He did not hug her, not because he didn't want to, but because the hug would have made everything easier than it should be. Thank you for coming, she said. Of course, he said. A server came. They both ordered wine. They didn't drink quickly. I handled it badly, she said when the server left. I know that. Declan nodded, not as agreement, more as acknowledgement that she was speaking. The way I said it, the timing, the all of it, it wasn't fair. No, he said quietly. It wasn't. She looked at her glass. I think I was scared. Of what? He asked. Of needing you as much as I did. I kept thinking that if I showed it, if I let myself actually rely on you, something would go wrong. You'd leave. Or I'd lose myself. I don't know. It sounds like something a lot of people feel, he said. She looked at him then. Not with relief. With something more complicated. You're not angry, she said. I've been angry, he said. I was angry the first 3 days. Then I was just sad. Now I'm trying to understand. She swallowed. The rent. We'll handle the rent properly, he said. I'll help you contact the landlord about removing my name from the lease. Or we figure out the split for the remaining months until renewal. We'll do it like adults. That's not what I'm here to talk about. What followed was 2 hours of conversation that did not resolve everything. It was not supposed to. They talked about the last year, about the moments she had started pulling back and the moments he had not noticed until much later, about the ways his steadiness, the very thing that had attracted her, had started to feel in her particular architecture of anxiety, like surveillance, about the ways her need for independence, the very thing he had admired, had shaded into disappearance. They did not decide anything that night. They did not get back together. They did not make promises. What they did was rarer and harder. They told the truth to each other without an agenda. The lease situation resolved itself practically. The landlord, a reasonable property management company on Demmenbrunn, agreed to a lease modification. Avery signed a new solo lease beginning December 1st. Declan was released from the agreement in exchange for 1 final month's contribution, which he paid without complaint. He found his own apartment 2 weeks later, a 1-bedroom in Germantown, 3 blocks from the old place, because he genuinely loved the neighborhood and saw no reason to exile himself from it. He ran into Avery once on a Saturday morning at the farmer's market on 8th. They stood together for a few minutes. She looked like she was sleeping better. He looked like he was sleeping better. They did not talk about getting back together. But when they walked away, both of them did so without the particular weight that comes from things left unsaid. That, in the end, was its own kind of resolution. 3 months later, Declan was on the porch at Marcus's old house. He had moved out by then, but they still spent Sunday evenings there, when Marcus asked him the question he had been waiting for. Do you regret moving out when you did? Declan thought about it. He took the question seriously, the way he took most things. No, he said finally. I regret that it got to that point. I don't regret how I handled it. Why not? Declan looked at the evening light coming through the trees at the end of the street. Because I told her the truth. I didn't make it ugly. I didn't make her pay for the hurt. I didn't pretend I was fine when I wasn't. And I didn't go back until there was something real to go back to. He paused. There's a difference between loving someone and making them the reason you stop standing up straight. I figured that out the hard way. But I figured out. Marcus nodded. He picked up his beer, and the porch held them both in the particular quiet of men who have learned something they wish they hadn't needed to learn. My personal reflection. What Declan and Avery's story reveals is not really about rent or leases or phone calls going unanswered. It is about something much older and much more universal. The way human beings manage fear by disguising it as preference. Avery did not want to be alone. She wanted to stop being afraid of needing someone. Those are entirely different desires, but when they live inside the same body, they can feel identical. She reached for the only tool available to her in that moment, distance, and called it self-awareness. That is not manipulation, exactly. It is something more sympathetic than that. It is a person acting from a wound they have not yet named. Declan, for his part, was not the picture of passive sainthood the story might make him appear. His steadiness, while genuine, also carried a form of emotional distance. A man who accepts being asked to leave without a single question, who folds shirts and moves out in 48 hours, is not entirely at peace. He is, in his own way, also managing fear. The fear of being someone who fights for something and loses anyway. the fear of needing too much, just like her. They were, in the end, more similar than either of them knew. What the rent call revealed was not Avery's selfishness. It revealed the gap between what she had imagined, freedom, clarity, a lighter life, and what she had actually purchased with her words. Reality has a way of arriving on the first of the month, indifferent to the emotional logic that preceded it. The most honest thing in the story is also the quietest. When Declan says, "I didn't go back until there was something real to go back to," he is not describing a tactical decision. He is describing what it looks like when someone has finally understood the difference between love as a feeling and love as a practice. The feeling was never in question. The practice, the daily choice to show up honestly, to set terms without cruelty, to hold a boundary without turning it into a weapon, that was what had to be learned. Neither of them was the villain. Both of them were the student.